Okay, so before we start, let me introduce myself, what my experience in cybersecurity world, my practical skill, and also my instructor skill. As I mentioned before, I'm Hisham Mahmoud. Currently, I'm Security Operation Center Manager at one of the Egyptian bank. Okay, I'm responsible to manage the Security Operations Center team, and I was a senior red team offensive operator at one of confidential place. Okay, that I cannot share information about this place. And I was certified instructor from EC Council, hold most of EC Council certificate, like certified ethical hacker, certified EC Council certified security analyst, CHFI for forensic investigator, ECIH for incident handler, LPT for licensed penetration tester, and many other certificates from EC Council, eLearn, IC Square, and ISAC. I was a speaker in many conferences, like Arab Security Conference, JISAC, and I'm IEEE cybersecurity mentor here in Egypt, and also Google Developer Group cybersecurity mentor track. Okay, what we're going to cover simply this course or this workshop divided into two courses. Okay, so we have the first course would be red teaming, and second course would be penetration testing. Okay, so red teaming, we're gonna have a look into what is red teaming. So in red teaming part, we're going to understand the red teaming process, engagement. Okay, is a different role in is there a different role for the red team member here? Okay, we're going to also see red teaming threat or intelligent driven and the normal red teaming approach. Don't worry, I'm going to explain every step in red teaming. Okay. Once we're done with introduction with red teaming and build our methodology, I'm gonna move to the next interesting part. So the next interesting part, we're gonna have a look into Linux basic. Okay, so gonna install a Kali Linux. Okay, and once you received a voucher from TryHackMe, we're gonna have a TryHackMe Labs. It will be a great platform to use through our workshop here. So we're going to cover Linux basics, how to use Linux, how to install operating system, how to navigate between files, how to run service, how to install a software, how to update, how to upgrade, how to manage, process and so on. So yeah, it's very, very interesting part here. We're not gonna also cover Linux basics, but we also gonna cover, okay, bash scripting. So let me add this one to the third point. So I'm gonna have a bash scripting. So bash scripting, it would be a scripting language that we're going to use. It's very, very interesting and it's very easy to learn. And we're gonna use a bash scripting for automation. Okay, so yeah, as a red team member or a penetration tester, sometimes you find yourself using tons of tools and tons of options and so on. And sometimes it's hard to remember all of these options. So we need to have a kind of automating the process here. So yeah, that's very, very interesting part. We're gonna build a basic tool using a bash scripting. So I'm gonna make all of you familiar with bash scripting when we enter to the third part here. Okay, once we complete the third point here, okay, I'm gonna introduce to all of you the penetration testing methodology. So yeah, we already have knowledge about red teaming process, engagement, and so on. And I'm gonna introduce to you a penetration testing. Okay, penetration testing methodology. Okay. We're also going to see today what's the difference between red teaming and penetration testing. But in penetration testing methodology, we're going to cover a very interesting part. First thing would be information gathering. And information gathering is very, very essential because in this phase, we are going to collect data using passive techniques and active techniques. And passive techniques, we're going to collect data without direct interaction with the target. But an active information gathering or active reconnaissance, we're going to collect data, but here we have a direct interaction with the target. So yeah, that's information gathering phases here, like collecting an IP address, username, telephone number, for example, any information about the company. But in red teaming, also going to collect this data, but we're going to use something called threat intelligence. But I'm going to show you how to do both here from red teaming perspective and from penetration testing perspective. Once we complete information gathering, we're going to move to the second part here. It will be scanning. So once we received some IP address from information gathering phase, in scanning phase, we're going to identify what is the live host, okay, what is the open port, what is the running service, and what is the operating system. Okay, so scanning is very, very important step here. So with the data we collected, now we expand. Okay, we expand now this information. Okay, once we complete scanning, we have enumeration. And enumeration, it's always an active scan. Okay, like scanning also, but sometimes scanning could be also launched using passive techniques. Okay, but enumeration here we have a direct interaction with the target. And we try here to communicate with the service, try to communicate with each port, okay? And the port is like a window, serve an application or serve service, for example. So can I communicate with the service to extract more useful information, okay? So once we complete the enumeration part, we're gonna now have a look into vulnerability scanning. So vulnerability scanning is very essential because now we're gonna detect if the target is vulnerable, okay, or have any weak point. And if the vulnerable have any weak point, now we're gonna exploit, we're gonna use this weak point to control the victim machine. Once we exploited the target or exploited the vulnerability, maybe we have an administrator access, which is nice. So now we have a full control of the system, but sometimes we find ourselves have a user privilege, okay, a normal user, okay. So now from normal user, we need to elevate our privilege. So we need to increase our privilege here to become an administrator. So we have privilege escalation process, okay, moving from a normal user to an administrator. Once we elevated our privilege, now we have the last part will be covering the tracks. So covering the tracks as a penetration tester is very, very important. We know this step here mostly done by black hat hackers who aim to, hack our companies, for example, and lead their tracks. But in covering tracks here as a penetration tester, we wiping any backdoors that we used or any tools, for example, because we don't want anyone to use the same tool to hack into the company again. So yeah, these steps we are going to cover, and it's very, very essential to understand all these steps here. Okay, so once we are familiar with penetration testing phases, okay, we're gonna have a look into web application attacks, for example. So here we're gonna cover tons of scenario exploiting a different target, okay? And in privilege escalation, we're going to cover a Windows privilege escalation and Linux also privilege escalation, how to elevate your privilege in a Linux window, okay, in a Linux operating system and Windows operating system. Once we completed this part, we're gonna have a look into web application penetration testing. So web application penetration testing, I'm going to show you how to find a vulnerability in web application. It's very, very important in OSCP exam, or if you're interested to do some penetration test, web application penetration testing, or you're interested also in bug bounty platform. So I'm going to share with you a techniques, a methodology here that you are going to use later. And I'm also going to try to exploit a vulnerability in a site, okay? Because I know it would be interesting how to apply the knowledge we had into a real target. Okay. SQL injection, also vulnerability. I'm going to show you how to exploit SQL injection, local file inclusion, remote file inclusion, cross-site scripting, CSRF, file upload, and so on. So we're going to cover a tons of web application vulnerability. Okay. And in exploitation phase here, I'm going to show you also how to using a framework like Metasploit framework, for example, to exploit the vulnerability. And in OSCP exam, if you're planning to take an OSCP exam, it's not allowed. Okay, so you need to you know, locate a public exploit. So I'm going to show you how to find exploit for vulnerability using an internet and start modify these code in order to, you know, exploit a vulnerability in target. So gonna locate a public exploit and fixing exploit. Let me add this one. Okay, locate public exploit and also fix exploits. We're gonna have a look into passwords attack. So interesting to launch a offline password attack or crack some hashes and so on. And we're gonna also cover buffer overflow vulnerability. So buffer overflow, one of interesting topic in OSCP exam. And I know some people see buffer overflow hard, but don't worry, I'm gonna give you my methodology here. Okay, how I'm gonna exploit buffer overflow and can have a tons of lab which make all of you comfortable with exploiting a buffer overflow. Once we understanding a buffer overflow, we're gonna have a look into an active directory attacks. So we're gonna, you know, attack Kerberos protocol. So first we're gonna learn about Kerberos and Active Directory. Once we have the basics knowledge of Active Directory, we're gonna exploit a different vulnerability like AS reposting, Kerberos, silver and golden ticket, doing enumeration, Active Directory enumeration, and so on. Okay. So yeah, don't worry, that's from a high level or bird view perspective. And we are going to map here those techniques with red teaming approaches. So the most important thing here, red teaming, we are going to use a stealthy technique, bypassing an anti-malware, bypassing firewalls. So using a less noise in environment. So when I'm going to introduce all of you Nmap, so I'm going to introduce Nmap stealth mode, how to use Nmap without detecting by a SOC or Blue team. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover. So also we have a job description here. Okay, so this job description is very, very important. So once you complete this workshop or this course, now you have real knowledge that you can go and apply this knowledge, okay, and apply for job. Okay, so penetration testing is very, very interesting topic, and we have a lot of company ask for a penetration tester. You can open, for example, LinkedIn, and from LinkedIn here, let me show you something. Okay, you can go to jobs, and from jobs, just type, okay, penetration tester. So we have a tons of penetration tester. You can switch, for example, I'm looking for penetration tester in Netherlands. And yep, we have tons of penetration tester job application here. And once you complete this workshop, now you have a real practical experience, and you can also apply the knowledge here. So here's some key responsibilities. So you will conduct a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing on web application, network, and infrastructure for client. And here we are going to cover, you know, using automated tool and manual techniques in order to launch a penetration testing and find vulnerability against web application, network, and infrastructure, and so on. How to identify, and exploit security vulnerability. So I'm going to show you how to run a security vulnerability scanning and also how to find a vulnerability using a manual inspection. So manual and automated techniques. Collaborate with engineering and the product team to improve the security posture for platform and client-facing solution. So the reporting phase will be very, very essential here. I'm going to show you how to write to report, how to help the customer, and how to help the company to understand what is the problem they're facing and so on in order to remediate these vulnerabilities. Develop and maintain clear conscious report of and define vulnerability, risk remediation, and strategy, and keep updated with emerging security threat, trend, and technology. So threat intelligence, very, very important part here, how to collect recent information about recent vulnerability, how to find exploit, okay, on the internet. So yeah, this skill is mandatory. Provide guidance and support to client improving their security posture, sharing knowledge and mentor other team member on best practice and technique and penetration testing and vulnerability assessment. Design and conduct simulated social engineering attacks. So I'm going to show you how to launch a client-side attack using phishing techniques here. So yeah, we're going to cover this part also. Review a code for security vulnerability. So once we have a web application module, I'm going to show you how to do some, code review to understand the vulnerability and exploit the vulnerability. And yes, we're going to cover a methodology for penetration testing from A to Z. And yep, here is all the knowledge that you're going to have, and you can also put in your CV. Okay. So yes, that's the introduction. And I hope everything clear now, and if you have any question, yeah, just share it with me. Okay, so yes, let me start now with the first part in our workshop. So today I'm gonna share with you some theoretical information, and I believe we're gonna have the last 30 minutes for a full penetration testing scenario, and I'm going to show you some gaps in penetration testing that we're going to cover later in a red team process. Okay, so today we're going to cover a red teaming process, role and responsibility of red team member, red teaming methodology and framework, the difference between red teaming and penetration testing, and penetration testing standard. Okay, perfect. So let's now have a look into an overview of red teaming process. So why red teaming or why penetration testing? So we know now the data is very, very, very important. Any company controls the data can control the world, and we agree with that, right? So if you have a look into Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Google, Apple, and so on, all these companies have tons of data which they can use to generate, okay, or create money, right? So if they control the data, they can control anything, okay? So how the company make sure that they are secure? Someone can tell me, hey, they can go now and buy security controls like firewall, intrusion prevention system, intrusion detection system, antivirus, EDR, endpoint detection and response, NDR, network detection and response, XDR, extended detection and response. They can go and buy tons of security controls or tools here, which is nice. But how I know this tool is effective? I can tell anyone, hey, you could go and buy a door, for example, for your home. Go and buy a door, right? But I need to test this door. Is this door strong? Can anyone break this door easily, right? How, can anyone pick lock the key, for example? So you need to test the security first. And here we have a red teaming and penetration testing. They are responsible for testing companies' security control and help companies to elevate their security. Okay, so they take their security from 0 level, for example, to 100%. Okay, so red team, if you read here, okay, so we know cybersecurity is constant race between white hat hackers and black hat hackers. So we have the good people here, they try to find a vulnerability in our system and help us to secure or remediate this vulnerability. And we have also black hat hackers. They have knowledge, the skill, and so on, but they use their skill and knowledge to break into my company and steal my sensitive data, which is very bad, right? And as a threat in cyber world evolve, so does the need for more specialized service that allow companies to prepare for real attack, okay, the best they can. So red teaming is testing our security, company security. And penetration testing also aim to find a weak point in our company, okay. But the difference between red teaming and penetration testing, in red teaming, we simulate adversary behavior. Okay, so let me clarify more about red teaming. So for example, as I mentioned before, I'm working in a bank, right? And if I want to secure my bank, I can go and buy security controls like firewall, IDS, and so on, okay? And sometimes I need to check my controls against certain type of attack. For example, I'm afraid if someone could hack into my internet banking system, okay, and from internet banking system, he can now, send, for example, millions of dollars, okay, to another account. So I'm going to hire now red team member. So I'm going to give the red team member here the scope. And I'm also telling the red team member here, I need to check if attacker can use this specific approach or this specific methodology to hack into my internet banking system. And also, I need to check my security operations center capability. So I have a team responsible to monitor 24/7, okay, to detect any malicious activity. So now in red teaming, I'm simulate a certain activity, and also I'm trying to make my blue team, okay, detect this activity by increasing their capability. So I'm testing both my security and my blue team here. But in penetration testing, okay, I can ask the penetration tester to find all the vulnerability and tell me if this vulnerability is exploitable. So, hey, could you check if I'm vulnerable to this kind of vulnerability? And please, if I am vulnerable, could you show me the impact by exploiting this vulnerability? So yeah, that's the main difference between red teaming and blue teaming for now. Is that clear?
Yes.
Perfect. Nasif Goma?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
Perfect. So red team mainly designed to simulate an adversary behavior, okay, and testing my blue team capability, my defense team here. But in penetration testing, hey, I'm asking someone to find all the vulnerability and try to exploit these vulnerability. Okay, so that's the main difference between red team and blue team. So we have vulnerability assessment also, and vulnerability assessment now we launch an automated tool, and vulnerability assessment, it's a part of penetration testing. Okay, vulnerability assessment, it's a part of penetration testing. So in vulnerability assessment, we launch a vulnerability scanner to find the vulnerability, but we don't know if we really, okay, vulnerable to this vulnerability. Okay, we need to show the company here a real impact. And in order to show the company real impact, we now hire a penetration tester to exploit this vulnerability. If it's exploitable, yeah, that's bad for the company and good for the penetration tester and so on. Okay. So yeah, that's different between blue team and red team. And as I mentioned, vulnerability assessment is the simplest form of security assessment. We'll try here to identify as many vulnerability in many system in network as possible. And yeah, that's a simple illustration here. So we have a vulnerability scanner like Nessus, Nexpose, OpenVAS, for example, GFI Landguard. We have tons of vulnerability scanner, and this vulnerability scanner have a list or a database with all the vulnerability, and we configure this vulnerability scanner here to check if we are vulnerable to certain vulnerability. For example, if I'm using Windows, I'm going to run a vulnerability scan against Windows using a Windows policy, for example. And now we analyze the system. If we have a vulnerability, let's check and make a risk assessment. If this vulnerability is critical, we need to remediate this vulnerability very fast. If it's slow, yep, we can leave this vulnerability until we remediate all the critical vulnerability first. So in this process here, we use some prioritization. Okay, so yes, critical is most important here. High is, you need also to solve it or remediate it as soon as possible. Medium, yeah, we can wait 2 or more 3 days, for example. But low, yes, we can wait for 1 month to solve this vulnerability. Okay, so yeah, that's a simple vulnerability assessment process, and we always run vulnerability assessment using an automated tool like Nexpose. Vulnerability assessment using vulnerability scan like Nexpose, Nessus, and so on. In penetration testing, we try to attempt here to exploit a vulnerability found on each system. So not scan only for vulnerability, but we also try to use this vulnerability to control the system or extract more useful information from the target machine. Okay, we can also use some post-exploitation techniques to gather more helpful information, as I said. And here is the process. We gathering some information. We try to have a threat modeling. Okay, what is the threat the company may face? Doing some vulnerability analysis using automated or manual techniques. If you find the vulnerability, yes, that's great. Now we can exploit the vulnerability. We can do post-exploitation after, collecting more useful information to move between targets here and report, your finding to the company. That's a penetration testing process. And in red team engagement, now we know we have emerging threats. So after 2008, we have a new domain of warfare. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Okay, have you ever heard before 5 domain of warfare?
No.
No.
Okay, so let me share with you this interesting information. So the first era of war, okay, was land, right? So we know we have 2 army, they fight each other, okay, on the land, and who have the good army who can win this fight, okay? And yeah, it's very, very old type of war. After that, the war get evolved, and now we have war at sea, right? Actually, let me share with you. Yes, I believe this one is interesting. And yeah, this one is a most interesting one. So if you look closely here, we have 5 domain. In the past, we have land, so we have army fighting each other, okay? And we have the strengths and we have the knowledge of war. He can now compete the other army. And now this type of war get evolved to the sea. So now we have a wooden ship fighting, okay, in the sea, for example, and so on. And after that, okay, after we know the Viking and so on, we have air. So, China came with a hot air balloon and they used balloons in war and so on. And now the fight had another look. So yes, in past we have land, we have water, and now we have air. And we get a new domain here. And we have a fight between Russia and United States. Who controls the space, he can control the war, right? So imagine that you have a satellite in the space, and this is satellite, for example, can fire laser, for example, or can spy on another country. So yeah, that's a very, very interesting warfare domain. But after 2008, the NATO, they said, if someone penetrate our network or attacked our web application, for example, that's a war declaration, okay? And they now form a new warfare domain, and this domain called cyberspace, okay? So cyberspace is the most interesting and the most important domain here, because if you control, okay, the technology, you can control the space, you can control air, you can control ships, and also you can control those people here, right? So imagine that they use, a helmet, and this helmet, okay, have a kind of technology, for example, or this weapon have a GPS, or try to increase this soldier accuracy, for example, by do some, interesting calculation to hit the target from the first time. And imagine that if someone controls this domain here, yes, he can definitely win the war, right? So the most critical and important warfare domain, it will be cyberspace. So after 2008, cyber security become very, very, very hot topic. Okay? Okay. We have, for example, a state-sponsored hackers. Hackers operated and trained by a government or by nation. So, for example, now we have a Wagner group, which is, a hacking group from Russia. Okay, and they also called APT29. Okay, so if you search on the internet for APT29, so we have Cozy Peer and we have, Fancy Peer. So yes, founded in 2008, and they using a cyber attacks against, other nation, for example. Okay, and America, for example, or United States, they need to stop Cozy Pair, or they need to detect Cozy Pair. So they need to launch a red teaming activity here based on Cozy Pair or Fancy Pair attacks and tactics and techniques and procedure, right? So now the United States, okay, or the Department of Defense, for example, or the Central Intelligence Agency, they collect information about Cozy Peer and Fancy Peer, how they launch attack, and start to simulate those attacks on United States companies, okay, and see if they will be able to detect those attacks in order to evaluate, okay, and make their security control more mature, okay. So Red Team, it's take this game to another level. So we know we have emerging threat. We have now nations start to hack each other. Russia start to hack United States. China start to hack United States. Also, United States start to, attack Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia start to attack, Iran and United States and France. France start to attack Algeria. Algeria start to attack Israel. So we have a new domain of war here. Okay, so instead of asking your soldiers to go and fight or pay a lot of cost here, a lot of bill, okay, in order to make an airstrike, for example, now it's easy. You can control work from one place, okay, using an only laptop, which is amazing. So in order to protect your infrastructure, your country infrastructure, you need to simulate attacks, okay, similar to those real threat actor or state sponsor attackers or adversary, adversary, for example. So to keep up with emerging threat, red team engagement were designed to shift the focus from regular penetration test into a process that allow us to clearly see our defense team capability and detecting and responding to a real threat actor. I know it don't replace traditional penetration testing, but it's very, very important. Okay. And here we try to check the tactics, techniques, and procedure. For example, we know Russia, they can launch attack based on these tactics, techniques, and procedure, and so on. So yes, we're gonna simulate the same attack, and I'm gonna ask my blue team, hey, could you detect this kind of attack? You can't, so we need to do the same exercise again and do or write another tools and detection rules, for example, moving again to preparation phase to make our blue team now able to detect those kind of attacks. So yes, by this engagement, we will improve the security control in place. And if you look into this image here, okay, I brought it from TryHackMe. It's very, very interesting. So we have a red team member here. He tried to simulate attacks or try to penetrate or enter to any of these machines, for example, based on the red teaming objective here. And we have also the security operation centers, okay, and we have the SOC analyst in this department. They monitor the traffic and they see if they able to detect these kind of attacks or not. If they didn't able to detect this one, we have a problem here. We need to improve this point and also improve this point. Okay. If we able to detect the red teaming activity, yeah, that's great. But maybe the real adversary can, use a different techniques, for example. So we must be ready. We must understand their frameworks, their tactics, techniques, and procedure, and keep ourselves updated. And also now we are as a red team side, so we need to shift our mindset and we need to try to understand how the blue team member really detect our attacks in order to bypass the detection mechanism they use. Okay, so it cat and mouse game, and it's very, very important, very, very interesting. Red teaming is very, very, very hot topic. Okay, so let's have a look into role of responsibility, role and responsibility of red team member. And after these two slides, we can now have our first break. Okay, so we have three important team here. We have red team, we have blue team, and we have white team. So we know the red team will simulate the activity, the red teaming activity here, based on a real threat actors, TTP, tactics, techniques, and procedure. And the blue team, they try to defend a target network. My SOC people, they need to detect the adversary or the red team activity here. Okay. And the white team will be the referee here. So yes, this is very, very important. This guy here will try to respond, okay, for try to capture red teaming and blue teaming activity and see if there is any deviation in the role of engagement and so on. So yeah, they're using monitoring, okay, or they are a monitoring team here, and they detect the blue teaming activity and red teaming activity here. So serve as a referee between red team activity and blue team response during an engagement. Controls the engagement environment, network monitors, adherence to the role of engagement. So yes, we are signing a role of engagement before our engagement, which contains the scope, the roles, the allowed techniques, not allowed techniques, and so on. And we have a different role in a red team. We have red team lead, we have red team assistant lead, and we have red team operator. In this course, we will be the red team operator, but I'm going to show you also how to plan for the red team activity as a red team lead. So a red team lead will plan and organize engagement at high level. So in our course, also going to have a look into red team lead. Okay, but yes, this course helps you to become a professional red team operator. Red team assistant lead assists the team lead in oversee engagement, operation, and operators. And red team operator will execute the assignment here delegated by a team lead here.